Hey, and a very warm welcome to the Into the LightWeb podcast with me, your hostess, Joanna Hunter, metaphysical teacher, spiritual life and business coach, published author, and the high priestess of the LightWeb, a spiritual technology that will change your life. This is the place to be to talk everything under the LightWeb, from consciousness, relationships, to money, to spiritual business, and everything in between. Hey, it's Joanna Hunter here for another Into the LightWeb podcast, and I am joined today by the beautiful Sharn. Come and introduce yourself, Sharn, and tell people what it is that you do in the world.
Hi, Joanna. Thanks so much for having me. So, of course, I'm Sharn Khaira. I'm the super proud owner of the Asian Female Entrepreneur Collective, and I'm a certified business and mindset coach for Asian female entrepreneurs and women of color. So I predominantly help Asian women release their cultural blocks, overcome lots and lots of obstacles that we've all got from cultural conditioning, and obviously build a business as well that's sustainable and successful.
Amazing, amazing. And before we hit record on this podcast, we were talking about how important women are in the business world and what impact that we have, because we tend to have a brain that thinks more community orientated, which is so important within the Asian community. Can you speak a little bit on that, of like the kind of impact that these women in your world are having on their communities?
Yeah, absolutely. So I just truly believe, especially in my culture and my, religion, so to speak, like the money has, primarily always been in the hands of men. And actually women earning their own money is quite a new phenomenon. It hasn't been going on for that long, so to speak. And I found that, especially as my business grew, and my clients' businesses grew as well, we've just seen this incredible shift happening, collectively, I would say. Because I think as women, especially community-based, such as our cultures are, we think a lot about our community. And that can be things like parents, it could be things like friends, team, people we know in general. And what we found collectively, like as our businesses has grown as Asian women, we tend to give back so much more to the community, and empowering other people that potentially are from marginalized backgrounds or disadvantaged backgrounds. And I found that that has been just so powerful. So one of my examples was, which I was sharing with you, my parents first came to this country in the 70s, and my parents have had like manual jobs like all their lives. My parents worked like 3 jobs to put food on the table. And one of the things that I was able to do for my parents a few years ago was like pay off, the remaining chunk of their mortgage. And that was just so powerful, because I think, especially as Asian women, because, of our lineage and the generations that have come before us, like there's been so much struggle with like money and empowerment and women having money. And I truly believe like the impact we're having now, whether it's my clients, myself, women in general, it's just really going to impact future generations as well. And I think that's like so amazing. And it's such a big shift happening now. So I think we need to get money into more hands of women.
I totally agree with you. Tell me, one of the things is, do you feel that in your world with the Asian women, do you feel like what's happening is that it's giving them a bigger voice as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that as we all know, like money gives you choices. It does give you freedom. Absolutely. I know there's so much like talk around this, but ultimately it does. So I think that when women have their own money and they're not reliant on partners, husbands, future inheritances, which is a big thing in our culture as well, like where predominantly the men get the money, from families. The women don't normally inherit the money unless their parents are quite modern, or maybe they're like an only child. I feel like us having our own money and then not relying on these kind of external sources yeah, it definitely gives us more freedom, more empowerment, and just more choices as well. Because otherwise, like, if we didn't have this, then we're always at the mercy of like the men of the family, you know, the elders, so to speak, which really is just, I just personally feel that that's just not a path for me. Or, you know, I know a lot of women that work for me, they don't want that either. And it's really, I think it's so important to be financially empowered and financially free. Because say, for example, and I've seen this with so many of my clients, like say, for example, like you're really reliant on your partner or your husband, and they, I don't know, there's a marriage breakdown, or, you know, something happens and you're not in that relationship anymore. Financially, women can then become very vulnerable and in a really difficult place. And I've heard some, like, you know, really awful stories where women have become homeless, they've been chucked out, or, you know, they're just
And they
so,
literally have nothing. And
they
some of
have
them don't even
nothing.
have access to bank accounts and things.
No, exactly. So I think there's definitely a shift now. I think I work with a lot of, I would say, modern Asian women, but I definitely think that, like, in those modern Asian women, there's pockets of women that still, you know, they are still reliant on, you know, husbands, partners to fund them. But I think people are waking up and people are rising up, which I think is really important.
Amazing. In my world, we talk a lot about fear of, you know, and I think when any human is in any type of fear, the fear of, you know, the lack of empowerment that comes from the lack of money, for instance, and the fear of what will my future be like, or the fear of maybe staying in a relationship that might not be healthy, and, you know, but they have nowhere else to go because the fear is keeping them in that maybe an abusive situation and things like that. That, you know, it is so important that we empower the next generation and that we empower women to be able to stand on their own feet and not form and be in these codependent relationships of where they're creating, you know, where they're literally really subject to this fear of like, well, I wouldn't be able to manage without, so I better stay put, or I better behave, or I better do this, even if we know it's not a healthy situation. So I love the work that you're doing, because I think it's so important, and especially in cultures where women haven't traditionally had an equal status. And although, you know, here over in the West, we've, you know, we're getting there. We're not there yet, but we are getting there. But in Indian cultures, you know, it's very much still very much a man's world over there, you know.
Oh yeah. And I think it's really difficult because especially in the UK, like, you do have these, you know, someone could say that I'm a really powerful Asian woman, and like there's obviously other people in the space that are doing so well, like, you know, Asian women are really flourishing. But if you actually look deeper within those kind of setups, you know, I know that, like, of one side of my family, for example, there's so much emphasis like on the men and what the men are doing. And that is still prevalent in so many families, for example. So, for example, it's a small thing, but, you know, we're having a party for my mum's 70th next month, and we've actually just decided that we're just going to do women only, because when the men come, the women have to look after the men, and it's all about, oh, the men being fed, the men being like looked after. So I think, like, there's definitely those family cultural you know, things
expectations
there.
almost.
But I think now, like, even the older generation, like my mum, like my auntie was the first one to break the mold last year, and she said, I'm having a party, I'm not inviting the men, it's just going to be the women, and we're going to have a great time. And I think they are definitely, I feel like they're changing, which is a really good thing. Because I definitely grew up in a really, really strict household when I was growing up, but yeah, they're still there, which I think we do definitely need to change that as well, I think.
And that's beautiful. And I think I think for the new generations coming up, it's quite a hard line to toe, because on one side we have tradition, right, which can be a beautiful thing as well, right? Like, absolutely, there's some beautiful like traditions and rituals and things like that, and we don't want to kind of let go of that completely, because that is the culture, right? And then on the other side, we've got this modern world that is beckoning and giving us things like empowerment and freedom and choice, which are so important as well. And I think it is, and it's so beautiful to see, you know, I bet with your aunt that you've been a huge inspiration. And it's so nice to see that when we're willing to kind of walk that thin line between the culture, between the you know, life, and we're able to walk that thin line, that we don't just inspire the generations below us, we also
Yeah.
embolden the generations above us. And that's how we start to break the mold, right, of what
Yeah.
was once like the societal norm, and start to create a new norm, which is so powerful and potent.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that in terms of like what you said, like culture can be such a beautiful thing. But in our culture, we do have, I would say, a lot of toxic traits as well. You know, I love the cultural things that we do at weddings and when we have our festivals, and, you know, the family setups that we have. We're very close to our families, we're very close to our communities. But then there's these toxic kind of cultural norms, such as let's be obsessed about what everyone else will think, you know, and just a lot of people pleasing. I see that with my aunts, I see that with my mum. Like, you know, my dad's not very well at the moment, and my mum, like this weekend, like wants to attend a funeral which is like up north 8 hours away, and that's the people pleaser in her constantly coming out. And I think that when we're in these cultures, I think we just have to decide for ourselves, like, what are the parts that really work for us? Because there's so many things that do work for us. And what are the parts that don't really serve us anymore, and that we actually want to release? Because, you know, as an Asian woman now, like in her 30s, I'm just like, it's like worlds apart, different from my mum, because obviously I was born here, I was raised here. And I think that like we definitely have to release those parts that don't serve us, because those parts then can, especially in business, can show up consciously and unconsciously, and really really block us. And it's a real thing. Like cultural blocks is like a real thing in business, especially when it comes to things like judgment. Like, we are hardwired to think like, what will other people think about us, you know? And that really does play into when we show up online, because we've got that inherent cultural conditioning that's always in our minds, like what will other people think, what all other people think, which is bad enough when you're just operating, you know, as a woman in the online space. But I think it's just so much more amplified when you're an Asian woman.
Yeah. What would be your top tip? Because I know that this is definitely a block that many people suffer from, like what will other people think is such a huge thing. What's been your top tips for kind of like, you know, like obviously we can't go like right into the nitty-gritty of clearing a block, but what would you say to somebody who's really going through that? Like, what would be like some steps that they can maybe take to start alleviating that pressure?
Yeah, so I remember when I first started my business, my wedding planning business, because that's what I used to have before being a coach, I would be so scared to share about, like, market my wedding planning business on Facebook, because I was thinking, oh my God, my cousins are going to think I'm desperate. My cousins are going to think I'm not doing very well. And then what I started to do was I just started to reflect on and journal on things like, well, what are the consequences of me just staying here and being stuck? And I think getting leverage like that can be really powerful. So if you think about, okay, what is the impact if I stay in this place 1 year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And then when you get that on paper, that's really
I
scary.
love it. I teach a very similar thing, and I bring it down to a piece of teaching that I call how much do you want it? You know, like how much do you want that change? How much do you want that shift? Because that can be the thing that pushes you through and out of your comfort zone, doing something that you don't, you know, that feels a bit awkward and like, well, maybe people will think. But I remember once hearing this quote, and it was you know, just to go out there, and it was about exercise, but it was like, go out there and do the exercise, and it doesn't matter if it's just a walk, because know this, you're lapping everybody that sat on the couch criticizing. And I thought,
Absolutely.
yeah, it's the easiest thing in the world to sit on that couch and criticize, but to pop a pair of, running shoes on and get out your front door, that is the moment you're out that front door, you're lapping everybody sat on the couch. And that was such a
Absolutely.
potent thing for me, because that really gave me like that little bit of bravery to start small, whether it's just popping those running shoes on and going out the door, or just putting yourself on social media or whatever it is. I love that tip,
Yeah.
Sharn. I love how yeah, it's so true, journaling on how much you want it, and it's so powerful when you like apply time to it, because what you're dealing with and tolerating right now may actually become intolerable in a year or 5 years time.
Oh, absolutely. I've been doing a lot of work on this recently, and I'm looking to really expand again. And it's kind of like you've got to really think about like where do you want to be? Like what is, and I think one thing that's always anchored me in when I've been really, really scared of doing things is just my why and my vision and my mission. And constantly always, because I think in business, like we always think of it as ourselves, like,
Mhm.
this is for us, or this is what we're doing, or this is what we're sharing. But actually, if you think about it in the context of helping other people, helping your mission, helping your vision, like you take it out of, it's not about you, it's about the impact you're having and the other people. I think that's such a powerful shift, because it's not just about you. Like our
No,
ego loves to make it all about us, but it's not
totally.
actually about us. And I think you have to be really brave and really courageous, because like even at the moment I'm kind of stepping into this more kind of money mindset, which I've completely transformed my life. Like over the last few years, I went from being in my overdraft for like over a decade, building like, a six-figure business, like doing over 500,000 in sales over the last few years. But so I'm really stepping into that kind of money mindset identity. But I don't know any other Asian women talking about money online. And that feels very, very scary. Like it's again like that judgment coming in. But then I think about, oh my God, like the other Asian women that I'm gonna get to help, and other women actually in general,
And
because
even just normalizing the money conversation, right? Because
yeah,
that it doesn't matter, what your background is. The money conversation tends to be taboo, like
yeah,
globally. And,
yeah,
and I would imagine, especially for Asian women who have not even had access to their own money for so long,
yeah,
to like, don't you dare comment on it and speak about it,
yeah,
and obviously just bringing that to the marketplace and actually discussing it openly and honestly, and things like that as well, because your example there of being in your overdraft for a decade, I think there's probably so many women who have done that and then think that they are perhaps like not doing it right or something like that, and not realizing, listen, we've all been there,
yeah.
right?
We've all been
It's
there.
like, exactly, like we've all been there, where it's like in on payday and 2 days later we're in that overdraft, like I think we've all had maybe an experience of that. But if the subject is so taboo and you don't get to speak about it, then how do you know that other people are going through that? So instead what happens is this horrible feeling of isolation.
Yeah, absolutely. And shaming yourself as well.
Yeah, shame,
Yeah,
isolation, guilt, feeling like you've messed up, all of these things. And all they're doing is like just really dampening your vibration and your frequency, preventing you from truly shining in life when you might have
yeah,
so much to offer as well. I love that you're going to move into that arena. I think that's going to be a really, really powerful arena. We're
yeah,
talking a lot in my world right now about healing your abundance. And as we're talking about healing your abundance, we're talking about healing it in every area. So like abundant relationships, abundant health, abundant money, and just really allowing and normalizing abundance. And I think this is something that's very a kind of very interesting subject, because often when we think of abundance, we think just money.
yeah, absolutely.
But obviously as somebody who has helped a lot of women gain that abundance and to start creating that for themselves and things. Tell us about some of the impact that that might have had in your communities, of like things that some of your ladies who have obviously started building amazing businesses and stuff like that. Because I find that if we can really tap into our abundance, I feel like we become like healthier body, mind, and spirit. Is that something
Yeah.
that you find is true for your ladies as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that like, I think with Asian women, taking a deep sigh here, it's we've got, because so many of us saw our parents working so hard. Like my whole thing around money is I saw my parents like working 3 jobs, even though my aunts and uncles who have done really, really well, and this definitely played into my money story, but the ones that have done really well, they worked really hard as well. They had convenience stores. So, but I've always had this belief that like you have to work really, really, really hard. And I definitely
Mm,
saw this show up in my wedding planning business, where I was undercharging chronically for overworking crazily. But what I realized over the years is that like you, as women, we're not built to work like crazy, like
no.
in a masculine, crazy 100-hour week, whatever it is. Like we're just not. And a few years ago, I had a bit of a health scare. I had they like called me in and they were like, you know, we're checking you for ovarian cancer, because my health was like suffering, and it was like a really big wake up call for me. And then I thankfully everything was okay, but I got diagnosed with PCOS, which is a hormone imbalance,
Mm,
and a hormone imbalance, you know, can be caused by stress. And I think if I look back at like my photos and stuff when I was like gaining weight, and probably my hormones were really imbalanced, was the time when I was really stressed out.
mm.
So I just made this commitment, like in lockdown, that I'm going to really be an example to other women, like that you don't need to work like crazy. You can prioritize your health. You can prioritize like taking time off, I haven't got children yet, but like some of my women like that I work with, they want to be with their children. They don't want to constantly be working.
Yeah.
So I think we are all getting there as a collective, but I think with my clients especially, like they value like family time, they value time with their
I
children,
love that.
and having, you know, abundance in all areas. Like that's definitely things that we are working towards. Like, you know, it's not always going to be perfect because life
Hmm.
isn't. But that's something that's really big for me. Like, you know, I know people do like crazy things like wake up at 4 a.m. and, you know, I think that's great if you can do it, but I'm not built for
No,
that.
I'm not going to be your 4 a.m. brigade. I think, one of the policies that we have in our business is no hustle ever.
Yeah,
And it's
exactly.
a policy, and I take it very, very seriously, in that I want to demonstrate that you can build a large business without literally working every hour the divine sends. Like, you do not
Yeah.
need to work every single hour. You do not need to burn the candle at both ends and try and burn it in the middle at the same time.
Yeah.
Like, that you can have a business that's built in ease, joy, and flow. And for me, that is the epitome of abundance, to be able to have an abundance of time and do the things that you want to do and enjoy your life, but also enjoy the fruits of your labor and be able to actually enjoy them. Because my first business was really built from the energy of hustle. I
Yeah.
had shops, and I built up these shops, and I worked as many hours. I might have given some of your aunts and uncles who run those convenience stores a run for
Run for
their
their
money, because I
money.
worked the hours, I put the hours in. And I had very much that belief that that's how you got ahead in life. Like, if you wanted to have good stuff and you wanted to do well in life, you had to like totally work like that. And I worked like that right up until I hit my huge burnout, which was
Yeah.
resulted in a massive hormone imbalance as well, funnily enough, which
Yeah.
was multiple organ failure, is how it resulted in me. And that was my wake up call. That was like, you cannot continue like this. And I began looking for a different way, and that's why we now in my current business have like a no hustle ever policy,
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
I think
It's
it's
so
just the wrong
needed.
energy to be working
Yeah.
from.
And I think also sometimes, Joanna, like what I love to do is like if I fit, I always have weekends off. I might work the odd Sunday if I need to. But if I'm feeling, what I found, what I used to do was be in this kind of box, like this 9 to 5 box.
Mm,
And I would be like, no, I've got to do my work in that time. And but now what I find is like I just go with the inspiration. Like sometimes in the evenings I'm inspired, and I don't really open my laptop in the evenings because me and my husband do have quite strict boundaries around that. We both don't work in the evenings unless I'm kind of doing coaching calls. But I do tend to just go with what my body feels and where
yeah, that's
intuition leads
nice.
me. Because this afternoon I did some like deep kind of work earlier, and I needed to have a bit of a breather, so I just didn't work this afternoon. Like for a few hours I was just chilling out. And I think sometimes like as women, like we can really box ourselves like this is the time I've got to work. But I think as long as you're feeling inspired and you're feeling energetic around your work, I think it's fine to, because I know like most of us people do love our work, right? So I think just going with what your body's telling you and those intuitive hits is quite important as well, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the body has its own wisdom. The body
Mm,
has its own wisdom, and it will tell you when it needs a rest. And I think the worst thing that we can do, especially as women entrepreneurs, is override that.
absolutely.
You were talking earlier about like the difference between men and women working, and I heard this quote, which was really like, this was just like, oh my God, life just literally makes more sense now. So they said that men's cycle is 24 hours, a woman's cycle is 28 days.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that we go through, so like men will go through like all of their emotional cycle in like just 24 hours, and then
Yeah,
their cycle renews. A woman's cycle doesn't renew for 28 days, and there will be different phases in each of those 28 days. So
yeah,
we'll go through like a very productive phase, then we'll have maybe like where the energy wanes and dips during that time. Men will have that happen in a 24-hour period. Women will have that happen across a 28-day period. And
yeah,
that for me was like, that's so true. That is such the difference. And yet, if you look at the marketplace and if you look at the workplace of society, it is there to satisfy a 24-hour cycle, not a 28-day cycle.
absolutely. And I think as women as well, especially like, not to be too like intimate, but our cycles are so important. Like all this time we're told like, oh, are you on your period again? Like, those kind of things like men just say to us when we're growing up, and you just think, oh, but it's actually true. Like I really noticed as a business owner, especially for me, someone who's gone through like PCOS and all the kind of hormonal stuff, like I definitely notice a shift when I'm coming onto my period, and hormonal mood swings are a thing. And I think also like cycle syncing is something that I'm really looking to do as well, like looking at, tracking my time of the month, and because it's different energy. I think like you don't want to be really extrovert at that time of the month. So it's
No,
better to do maybe some behind the scenes admin stuff or things that you need to get done. And then when you're kind of coming into your different phase of like when you're off the time of the month, then off your period, then you want to do those more extroverted things in your business. And I think so many women just don't like listen to their
we're not
body.
taught to honor our cycles because the
No, we're not.
workplace has absolutely no room for it.
No.
I remember seeing a TikTok, and I don't know if I agree with this, but it was this girl, and she was like, literally, feminism is the literal biggest scam to ever have hit women, because we're taught like you can do everything a man does, you can work like
Yeah.
a man, you can do all of this, right? Which is like, on one side she says it's good, on the other side we've just literally lost touch with everything that makes a woman a woman.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
like we're pretending we don't have cycles. We're pretending we don't have, like that we aren't drawn to wanting to be with our kids. We're pretending that, you know, that our energy doesn't fluctuate throughout the month. We're trying to do it like a man. And
Yeah.
so she was like, this is what feminism has done for women. And I was like, oh my God, like I agree with some of that, because I really recognize that is literally what led to my first burnout, you know, was that I ignored the signals of my own body. I didn't work in
Yeah.
harmony with my body. I worked against my body a lot of the time because, you know, my body was like, right, we're tired now, we're right, this is going on. And I'd be like, let's soldier on. Because I
Yeah.
was so determined that whatever a man could do, I could do it too. Never questioning, did I want to do it the way a guy does it? And realizing now, I'm like, no, I want to do it my way. I want to do it a way that feels empathetic to who I am as an individual, as opposed to like that pushing forward. So it's so
Yeah.
interesting. And I love that you are willing to talk about things like periods and stuff like that, because a lot of people don't feel like that even belongs in the business place. And I feel like it totally does.
Oh my God,
Like
it so
when
does. It's
there's a period in my month where I am like, I don't know what it is. It's like I've just been given more life force energy than normal. I'm like,
yeah.
I become like hyper focused. I'm like, anything that requires cleaning at that point in time, it's like, you better watch out because this is getting done, and things get organized and things like that. And then I have like another phase where I'm like, it's just too peoply out there.
Yeah. I'm
Just too
exact.
peoply.
Yeah, I'm just exactly the same. And I think it's so important to honor your body, because hormones are science. It's not just something that we're kind of making up. There's chemical changes happening in our bodies like every month, you know?
Absolutely.
And I think
Absolutely.
one of the best things I've done is get a health coach, because again, you know, we're not taught, and the system here, as much as it's incredible, I have so much respect for the NHS, like they're not, you know, they're not equipped to deal with like all these kind of problems that women have these days because of like stress and burnout and toxins. And I think my health coach has taught me so much. And I remember last month we were in the middle of a launch, and like I had just such painful periods. Like for the first time ever, I've had really painful periods. And it was literally so painful. And I had an amazing launch, but I was literally in bed all week. You know, I literally had to relax. I didn't push through. I wasn't getting any sleep because they were so painful. And I just did it. And I'm just so glad I did, because, you know, your health is at the forefront of everything. You know, your health is the
Yes.
table, you know, everything else on it, you know, your family, your business, you know, kids, money,
It's
it's
dependent on that
on the
foundation of health.
table. Yeah. If the table collapses, nothing is there. So health is
Yeah.
just so important, and honoring your body as well is so important.
I love that. I love that. And I think also as well, I mean, that's such a beautiful thing that you're bringing to the Asian female entrepreneur community, because obviously a lot of these ladies, maybe they're the only ones that are female entrepreneurs in their family, right? And so
Yeah.
their role models are men that literally worked every single hour that was possible to work, you
Yeah.
know, and then luckily for those guys, when they came home, there was a nice hot meal, and you know, and the laundry was done and the housework was done and things like that. And you know, and these pair women, like, not only are they trying to build that business with the model that men gave them, which was like to just, you know, soldier on regardless, and work every hour, but then they got to go home and do the cooking and the cleaning and
Oh,
lots of other things,
yeah.
you know. And I think it's so powerful that this is, I think, as a female entrepreneur, one of the things for me has been to like really bring a kind of softer feel into entrepreneurship,
Yeah.
and to bring that a kind of, you know, that your body is important and it's important to listen to it, and not really try and work against it, not be like, you know, not see your body as an excuse. Because I think a lot of, you know, I know in the early years of entrepreneurship for me, if my body was like, well, you know, giving up, I was like, oh, that's just an excuse, I'll push through because I'm bigger than my
Yeah.
excuses. But your
Yeah.
body giving up is a warning signal that something might not be all right.
Yeah.
And, you know, and it's not something to be ignored. And but I think we have to shed the limiting beliefs that and I think a lot of women have this, that if I don't do this now, it won't get done, or I won't get the prize, or I won't get the result. And it's like, for me, relearning that piece of conditioning has been relearning that there's many ways to get a result.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, I remember at the end of last year, like my dad became really, really ill. So I just, because my parents can't speak that much English, like, and they live like an hour away, like I had to jump in because, and my brother's got learning difficulties. So, you know, they rely on me a lot. And I wasn't going to just be like, okay, well, I'll just leave my parents. Like, you know, that's just felt so like out of alignment of who I was.
Just not gonna happen.
Yeah, just not going to happen. So I had to show up for my parents, and I had to take a step back from my business. I kind of cancelled my launches. I did some marketing. I went on a retreat. I was working on a big event, which we held in London in January. But then I just had to release this whole thing about, oh, you know, everyone's going to be talking about like the 2023 messaging, like I should be talking about it. And then I was thinking, oh, this is going to have an impact on my event and all of these things. But actually, I just released, like, I literally was like, I'm done. I'm doing some inner work in the background. I'm going to be showing up for my family. And then actually in 2023, we had like the strongest start to the year. You know, we sold so many tickets. We had a sellout mastermind launch. So it's just like so many people think like, oh my God, if I just loosen my grip, like everything's going to fall. But actually, sometimes like you have to slow down to speed up, you know? And this is something I'm really experimenting with my business this year, because last year we did so many launches, and this year I was like, so lots of things happening in the business. I was like, I don't want to do loads of launches, and I want to experiment with a different way of working and testing out different strategies. And that requires a level of letting go and releasing. And that is really scary when you've been doing your business a certain way for a few years. But I think that like, because of the online space as well, like, I think there's just so much pressure as well on women to quote unquote perform, like do really well, outdo them cash months each month, not have a dip, have crazy growth each year. But what I've realized this year for myself is like, I don't really want to kind of subscribe to that narrative. Like, I want to set my own standards and my boundaries around business and what growth looks like. So I think as women, like, we really should again tap into, what does success look
I
like
love
for
that,
us?
because one of the things, obviously I'm in the spiritual space.
Mm,
So one of the things that we call is spackled spirituality. And it's a phrase that me and my team have nicknamed. And it's basically, you know, because basically there is other women in my space who are spiritual coaches, and they coach all on, like, it's like no hustle and all easy and stuff like that. But then month on month on month, they're like topping the next month, topping the next month, topping the next month. And literally what it really is you've got a big piece of like what I call bro marketing, the masculine marketing,
yeah.
with a super, super, super thin layer of spirituality spackled on the top. And I'm like, this is not divine feminine energy,
No.
because the moment the moment that this, like, the sales dip or the increase isn't as much as they were hoping, these women are beating themselves up. And
Yeah.
it's like, and I think, you know, that is, as my daughter is studying psychology, and she came out with this term which I really made me think. And it was, she said, that's internalized misogyny.
Yeah.
You know, it's still misogyny. It's internalized. You've internalized it on yourself. You're holding
Mm,
yourself to the standard of like, you know, and your only measurement of success is if you top the month
money.
before.
I know.
And it can also, and there's also a level of addiction to that,
Absolutely.
you know, and they get into these addictive cycles. But when I feel like I feel very passionate about this, because when women pass that off as, you know, I'm a spiritual coach and I'm teaching you divine feminine energetics, and literally it's a little thin layer of divine feminine energy under a whole lot of bro marketing
Yeah.
and lots of hustle. I remember one coach that I joined her group, and when I joined her group, you know, she was all about like, I'm all in the flow, it's all easy. I mean, honestly, I thought I'd gained a new stalker. Her assistant was in my inbox so often.
That's
And I'm like,
crazy.
this is not the ease and the flow that you're talking about when you're having to chase down new people in your group to the extent I was offered this, I was offered that. Do I want to jump on
Yeah.
a call? Do I, you know, and like literally every other day they were like trying to reach out to me. And I'm like, that's not,
Yeah.
that's
That's
not,
not,
you know, that's not I attracted my results.
no.
You are literally, I'm feeling hunted right now. You are literally hunting me.
Yeah. And I feel like, especially in our culture as well, like, I feel like there needs to definitely be some balance. Like, I'm all good for putting in the work, but then I'm all for like calling it in, you know, because you can't. When I look back at my best launches or things that are great things that have happened in my business, like they're so unexpected, but they also happen when I release and surrender the most. And that's the
Yeah.
energy you want to be in. But when you're coming from this like masculine energy, it just never serves anyone because it's just all coated in masculinity. And also, it goes against of who we are, really. And I think it's so dangerous constantly tying our worth to numbers and results and outdoing each month. And I think in the online space, especially, like, there's just so much pressure now, you know, like, I
I
think
think so
people,
as well. And I think it's very unnatural because there is going to be ebbs and flows. There is going to be
yeah,
ups and downs. And, you know, if your self-worth, if your is measured by can you top it, can you top it, can you top it? I I think what we're ending back up in is that, you know, is a thinly veiled hustle culture.
yeah, it
You know,
is.
and
It's just another,
it's just the same, and it's the
yeah,
same crap, different day. And
yeah,
that's one of the things as a female entrepreneur, I really want to stand for something different. I really want it, you know, I'm very passionate about being an example and being somebody that stands for something different and that
yeah,
shows that you can build a business, that you don't have to work all the hours, that you can do it from energy that feels good and in alignment and in integrity, that you don't actually have to, you know, I remember one lady that I spoke to, and you know, and she was worried about something going on in her business, and then the next thing she lists off, like, I swear it was a laundry list of like all the spiritual practices that she was doing,
yeah,
right? And I'm doing this and I'm doing this and I'm doing this and I'm doing this. And I was like, does this woman realize that doing is a masculine energy?
yeah,
What is happening to her being? What
yeah,
is
abs
happening to her being in this moment?
and I think a
Because
lot of people get caught
yeah,
up in those rituals, don't they?
yeah,
Like
it's
the
like I
doing
have to do this.
rituals.
Like, so I'm doing the
Yeah,
journaling, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And it's
yeah,
like, I'm gonna fix the issue, right? And it's like, and I just looked at the big list and I was just like, wrote back to her and I said, it really just sounds to me like you actually just need a break and just to be
chill.
in your energy for a bit. You know, I don't
Yeah,
really think there's anything like majorly wrong. I think your body is literally saying, I'm tired. And instead, what you're doing is you're whipping out the laundry list of spiritual practices, and
yeah,
instead of being in your spiritual practice, you're doing your spiritual practice. And then you're wondering why you're still feeling burnt out and chasing.
Yeah,
And it is, and
absolutely.
it's one of these things. And I feel like, but I don't blame women when they do that, because our role models in business have been traditionally men.
Yeah, and I feel like this whole shift as well, women making their own money. I think so many of us want to succeed and we want to be the change. So and I think that like emotionally, like there's so much happening in the online space, but on an emotional level, we haven't caught up yet, from the emotional intelligence level. And
No,
I think sometimes like those lines can get really blurred, because I think we do want to change, but then we're so desperate to change. We're in that energy to change and be successful and succeed. Like it can really just drive you crazy.
I had this idea a wee while ago to kind of like, I was thinking about, because when I worked many years as a life coach, and one of the things, a phenomenon that I used to come across all the time was people would often be able to tell you very accurately what they do not want in their lives. But when I said to them, okay, but what's the energy that you would actually like? And they wouldn't be able to tell you, because I used to always talk about swapping the energy. So let's swap all the
Yeah,
stuff that you don't want for what you do want. But so many of them were unclear on what they do want.
you
And
are.
I was thinking about this a few weeks ago, and I was thinking about, right, like women want to become entrepreneurs and stuff, and that's really cool. But there isn't really, when I heard that lady on the TikTok and she was saying that, like feminine is the literal scam of the century, and I was thinking, you know what, the funny thing is that we don't actually have a model for and in like what would the model for divine feminine business totally
Be.
look like,
Yeah.
and that would be completely built from feminine energy from the bottom up, and what would that actually like fully look like? Because although I have built my current business from divine feminine energy, every single, like I feel like a little bit like I've been in like the dark, just feeling my way forward with it, because there wasn't anyone to say, right, it looks like this.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, what would the handbook on that look like? What would the handbook on that look like? Because I just feel like it's such a weird thing, because there is, like, I see so many women that I really admire in the online space, and a lot of them have done like you did in your first business, right? Like where you
Yeah.
hustled and you like tried to push that business forward and everything, and then realizing, you had your wake up call. But like,
Yeah.
what can we do to catch women before they reach that stage of needing a wake up call?
Yeah. I'm just gonna pop my light on, Joanna,
Yeah,
because we've
no
been chatting
problem.
a long time, and it's I think I think really I think if I look back to my wake up call, I know it sounds like really, really simple, but I think it's managing your stress levels. And
Yeah.
I think I don't really believe in the word balance, but having a blend. So for me, for example, the first few years of my business, my husband was working away in Canada, and we did live there for a bit as well, but I was neglecting everything else. Like my work came first. Like I remember like getting up in the morning and like first thing in the morning, like checking my emails, being on coffee, just in an awful anxious state. And I think that like if I had things outside of my business, because I'd moved away as well, it was very easy to just put myself into my business when my husband wasn't there and I was just on my own. And I think it's really important to like have like almost like a schedule, like your non-negotiables
Mm.
daily for your health. So for me now that looks like I don't go on my phone, I don't drink coffee, like I don't go on my phone in the morning at least, but I do my morning mindset routine. I'll maybe go for a walk, I'll do gratitude or meditation. Exercise is a big thing for me now. That's my non-negotiables each week. My supplements, having good food, like that's my non-negotiable. So I almost built these like things in, because it was just getting to a point where, like, you know, especially when first thing you're getting hit by social media, it's not a good thing for your nervous system. So I think like really knowing what your daily non-negotiables are, but then also like making sure that I know this sounds like so simple, but a lot of people don't, making sure like you've got a life outside your business.
Yes.
You've got
Oh my God, 100%.
other interests outside your business. Like now I have, because when we were in Canada again, like we didn't know anyone, and we used to travel at the weekends and stuff, which was amazing. And I traveled like all over America and Canada, but during the week, like I was very much focused on my work because there wasn't much else to do, like, you know, and it's like 40 degrees outside. But I think it's really important to just not be constantly plugged into your business, and making sure like you have relaxation time, you have your daily non-negotiables.
Yeah.
You know, simple things like massages. Like now I love going to fitness classes. It's just simple things like that.
Amazing.
I think I just was not I don't think I went to the gym for like so long in the beginning when I first started my business. Like my business was my priority. Like I would miss out on family stuff. I would literally, yeah, it just came first. Like anything, it was always the business. And I think I mean, I don't work like that anymore, and I encourage my clients not to as well. But I think having that is really important.
I think so too. I fully agree. And yeah, and I think it is really, and it isn't per se about finding balance, but I feel like I call it, in my world, I call it ebb and flow, honoring that the ebb is just as important as the flow. And I think the way that a lot of us are being conditioned around business is it's flow state all the time. And that's unsustainable for anything.
No.
And it is that, it's about getting that ebb and flow right. And yeah, I like that. Sharn, we could literally talk up a storm. We have talked up a storm. I am so happy that you came into the studio today to have this chat with me. Tell people where they can find you on the interwebs, and where do you hang out?
Yeah, I mostly hang out on Instagram. So my handle is Asian_female_entrepreneur. I also have a Facebook group, which is called the Asian Female Entrepreneur Club. And my website where you can find all my work is www.afeccollective.com.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And we'll make sure we'll link all those below the episode so that you guys can jump in there and check out all of Sharn's amazing work. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Joanna.